Well, I'm the Autism Dad, Victor Antunez, the inclusive Miami Realtor, and this is the Autism Podcast at Miami's Community Newspapers, where each week we bring you the people who are making a big difference in Miami's autism and special needs community. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Bob Davila, board member of The Rising Start, and his son, who is music teacher and director at The Rising Start. Bob, Diego, welcome. I am honored to have you here. So we'll start with you, Bob. Go ahead and tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got to The Rising Start.
Sure. Long story short, born New Yorker, Puerto Rican parents, famously known as New Yorkers. Diego worked in a number of different places, banking, investment banking, was in Brazil, stationed in Brazil. That's where Diego was born. And then we moved back to Puerto Rico, Miami, and ultimately Diego wound up moving here to Miami during the pandemic. And that's where we started working with Maria Alejandra Mejia, the founder of The Rising Start, to coach Diego. And they ultimately asked me to join the board, which I did and have been loving it ever since.
That's great. So, Diego, you are a musician. When did you get into music? When did you know that that was your life path?
Well, actually, it was a very good story, actually. Well, when I realized I was into music, it was back in 7th grade at first. I originally tried to learn the violin, but unfortunately, there was a few challenges a little bit ahead, according to my music teacher. It wasn't until the 8th grade where I listened to a Led Zeppelin album, one of my dad's favorite bands play, and I heard the guitars, mainly Jimmy Page play his guitar, and the moment I heard one of his solo, I said, that's what I want to do. I want to play guitar. So I started learning the guitar, and I was a little different than the other kids because all the other kids at school wanted to learn contemporary music. All I could focus on was Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, all the old stuff. And basically, ever since, I just started playing music and refining my skill every time.
That's great. You know, he calls it the old stuff, the 70s music, but that's our music. That's like my happy place.
Well, I call him the old soul because we take him to concerts at the old bands, and he's usually the youngest person there by a long shot. You know, we're surrounded by 60 and 70-year-olds, but he knows every single word, he knows every single lyric, and the people are looking at him like, really?
Mm-hmm. Diego, you know, speaking of violins, I had the violin duo here, Sophistic Cats, and they both mentioned that they had suffered what's called ableism when they were in school, where they were being excluded from music programs because of their autism. Is that something that you ever experienced?
Absolutely. I experienced some teachers and some students out there who were not really they're not as inclusive as other people are. And they were not really accepting towards my neurodiverse aspects of myself. They had a hard time understanding why I was always so happy or why I was full of energy. You know, I wasn't it was hard for me to keep focus in classes. I used to have this obsession where I used to carry all my music equipment around with me in classes because I was so obsessed with music at the time that, you know, it was like I couldn't get out of my head and people didn't understand that about me. But I guess ever since that all panned out, I was able to, you know, overgrow like the old music obsession and focus on other things. And ever since then, I haven't dealt with much ableism, as they say.
Bob, the mother of one of the violinists, she mentioned that she had to actually step in and intervene to have her daughter, because her daughter qualified. She was actually doing a favor for her daughter, but got her in. Did you find yourself having to do that?
I've had quite a few examples of having to step in, whether it was academics or whether it was music. And you know what I discovered is, to my surprise, even the people who you expect to understand how to deal with some of these issues had a hard time. And so you sometimes say, you know, do you let your kid fly? Do you let him work it out himself? And we tried most of the time to do that. But there were times when we said, you know what, it's not worth taking the risk of putting him out there on his own. And so we stepped in, and fortunately, you know, 10 times out of 10, it worked out, thank God.
That's great. You know, my daughter's 8 years old, so we haven't come to that yet. But what advice would be to a parent like myself, who in the future may face this? How would you go about handling that now? Would you do it the same? Would you change?
Your gut will inform you. You obviously take in the facts. You find out the best that you can, get the whole story, and then your gut will tell you, yes, this is what I need to do, and you go in and do it. And if you approach people in a professional manner, 9 times out of 10, you know, it'll work out. But you have to be strong, you have to be clear, and you have to be assertive. And that's just a fact of life, because people will resist. Teachers, therapists, they will resist because they feel they're the experts. And the fact of the matter is, the parents are the ultimate experts, and they need to be informed and then go in and be assertive about what they're doing.
Now, Diego, he's 27 now. My daughter's 8. So there's a big time gap there in the terms of autism awareness and acceptance. Do you think things have changed, or do you think it's the same? And as far as parents having to be aware of these things?
I think at one level it's better. I think the awareness is a bit better. The acceptance, I still think, has a long way to go. And then I think we talked about it earlier. The action piece is way behind. And so, an example is, Diego started working at a music school where they knew that he, was on the spectrum, and in spite of them saying, "No, we can work with that," things still didn't work out. And sometimes I say I blame them. Sometimes I blame society overall. But the fact of the matter is acceptance is much harder than I think most people realize.
Now, Diego, you're the one that actually went through this. If you were talking to a younger musician going through the ableism, how would you tell them to handle that?
Well, based on my experience, the way I would tell them is that no matter what anybody tells you or anything, know that everybody's been in your shoes at least once. Even neurotypical people have experienced ableism once because they don't fit into the right crowd and everything. So it's not like anything is new is happening, in my opinion. But I think that when it comes to if musicians who are experiencing that much, you just tell yourself that life is full of rejections. The musician's life, the music industry is very tough. It's very, one-sided. It's like a lot of things happen there. But the best thing to do is just keep practicing, keep going, because you never know what opportunities might jump at you in the future. And many opportunities have jumped at me since I kept that mindset.
It seems by talking to you and listening to you that you don't harbor any grudges. Would that be fair to say?
Well, that's the sweetest way to say it is that I do harbor once in a while some grudges, but then I eventually learn to move on from them because I realize that they're not going to do anything good for me in the future.
That's absolutely true. That's very wise.
If I could interject here, I every year when Diego has a birthday, I put a post on my hero, and one of the reasons I call him my hero is he has been beaten up many, many times over the years. I don't mean literally.
Metaphorically.
Metaphorically. But
he's a big kid. It'd be hard to beat him up.
That's right. But his the resilience that he has shown and the grit that he has shown, and show me that smile, right? That smile is always on his face no matter what.
That's good.
And so I think, to me, he has taught me a lot about resilience, about how to take the metaphorical beatings and then just move on.
Now, Bob, prior to the Rising Star, you were in investment banking and other entrepreneurial ventures. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how that helps you now in the Rising Star?
So I have a long history in business. I was a banker, investment banker, private equity investor, and then actually I wound up becoming an entrepreneur myself. One of my clients bought a business and he needed somebody to run it. So I went there, ran it. Thank God, knock on some wood, successfully sold that business. And then we were living in Puerto Rico at the time. And this not-for-profit group called Grupo Guayacan gave me a call. I knew a bunch of people on the board and says, we really need to develop an entrepreneurship development program here in Puerto Rico. Everybody wants to be a lawyer, doctor, whatever, but entrepreneurs is not something that's important here. So I wound up doing that for a number of years, fell in love with it, developed a program that has served over 2,000 entrepreneurs, has created a bunch of startups. And then when we left Puerto Rico, moved to Miami, and I joined the board of the Rising Start, I had a conversation with Maria Alejandra, our founder, and I said, you know what? I see that most of the kids are focused, to the extent that they can find jobs, that they're out there being trained for jobs in businesses, whether it's Publix or other places like that. Why don't we give our kids the opportunity to explore their own interests, explore their own passions, and creativity and innovation, and think entrepreneurially? And maybe they'll become entrepreneurs. Maybe they and their families will become entrepreneurs, or maybe not. But at least the creativity and the innovation is something they can use no matter what they do, no matter what job they take, no matter what business they get involved. Entrepreneurship, another example. You get a job someplace, bring some creativity and innovation, and do something different entrepreneurially within the company.
And you have this program at the Rising Start.
And yes, and so last year we started developing. We did our first program was the culinary program. We call it the Culinary Social Enterprise, where the kids are being trained in a professional kitchen and are now producing what we call the Rising Start Savory Sweets. We were starting off with cookies to sell, and then we're also starting what we call the Rising Start Collection and the Rising Start Marketplace, which is a brand of products that the kids themselves handcraft. And then the marketplace is a 4-channel sales operation where we sell the products to the public. Now, we're just launching this now for September. We did start the mobile marketplace this past year where the kids went off and sold candles, plants, hand-painted vases in farmers markets. Very successful. And so we're producing that with the idea that what we want to do is we want to teach kids how to be makers and how to be marketers. And
Great.
those two skill sets you can take anywhere with you.
You sure can, and they're very valuable.
And they're very valuable.
Yeah. Now, Diego, you're an entrepreneur because you're a musician. You not only teach at the school, but you also play music for different events. What would be your advice to young neurodivergent entrepreneurs that are beginning that path?
Well, I mean, the first thing that I would say to any musician is the basic thing that every teacher has said to me in the past. If you want to be the best you can be, there's only 3 words that you got to do, which are practice, practice, and practice. Same word 3 times, because a lot of the very famous musicians, Jimi Hendrix, Jimmy Page, all those people, they just practice nonstop, hours on end and everything. So, but in order to get into like the community, I think the best thing for musicians, because as a musician, just get out there, really, just get out into the community, try to find, open mics, jams out there that are playing with bands, sign up and everything, meet new musicians. And that's how I got to know a lot of musicians in the community. I know many Instagram friends of mine who are very good musicians. I met them in the community. I play with them on stage once in a while, and it's all good. It's a very good community. But I think the best advice I have is just to practice as hard as you can, perfect the instrument that you are trying to play or trying to give, and just go out into the community and show what you can do.
My guess is that the music community has been very open to you, yes?
I would say that, but there's also been some musicians out there who are not as open. But I just learned that everybody has their potion. Everybody basically knows what they like and doesn't like. And in the music community, there's always going to be some resentment towards other musicians based on skill and based on taste and style. And I've certainly experienced both sides and end of that.
That's great. Now, Bob, I think that a lot of people think that the private sector is maybe very different from the nonprofit sector, but I think that there's probably a lot of crossover entrepreneurially.
Oh, absolutely.
And how do people cross that bridge?
I think people who have the impression that not-for-profit work is sort of this sort of soft stuff, the nice to do type, nice to do things, objectives, realize that in the not-for-profit sector, there are certain objectives that we have to achieve. And so with our kids, we have the academic objective, we have the social skills and life skills objective, and then we have what I call the future readiness objective, which is how do we get our kids ready to achieve their fullest potential, however you define that. And the fact of the matter is, anybody who has an autistic kid or is involved in the autistic community, it's a wide spectrum. Literally, it's a wide spectrum. And so sometimes we talk about independence, and some of us expect that our kids are going to wind up becoming independent, living on their own, and finding a job. The reality is most of our kids are going to need some support in some form or another. And what we try to do at the Rising Start is understand where those kids are in that spectrum, and then prepare them for their fullest potential. And we do that with a combination of academics, life and social skills, and entrepreneurship training, the maker, seller, marketer training that we do.
And what are your thoughts on that, Diego?
I think that that's exactly what the Rising Star aims to do. We try to bring kids, and we try to make them better. We try to basically be like a startup, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree? I think basically the Rising Star is the best place, in my opinion, for any kid on the spectrum to start, because we teach you guys how to be the best you can be. We teach you guys how life is going to be like in the future, and we're probably, in my opinion, the best transition school for kids on the spectrum.
That's great. Now, Bob, my daughter, she's 8, so it's a long journey ahead of her. She's nonverbal, which I hope will change, but it might not change. So how do you train a child like that for the workforce?
So perfect. It's funny because we didn't talk about this. This is not prepped. So we have a young man who's nonverbal, totally nonverbal. He came to us, and he works with a device, and so he is in our culinary program now. So he cooks. He's a chef. He's in our entrepreneurship development program. He actually is a maker as well. Besides food, he'll work on the candles, and then we took him to a farmer's market, and my wife, who was another volunteer, took him around and would say to people, "Excuse me, if you have a second, I'd like to introduce you to," I'll use a different name, Mark. And I introduce you to Mark, and he has something to say to you. And so he had typed out, "Hi, my name is Mark, and I'm with the Rising Start, and I'm selling these products which we worked really hard to make. I got to tell you, everything sold out in an hour."
I bet it did.
And by the way, he got paid for it too, because we did pay him for being we gave him a commission for sales. And so think about that. Number one, the community sees somebody with purpose, and they can convince me to buy something. He feels a purpose, and his family feels that something has been accomplished and there's a purpose here. And so, again, yes, he needs a little help. He needs the guidance of an adult to get him started. But once he's started, and with a little bit of guidance, it works. And over time, he's become a little bit more verbal. We're working on that very, very hard with him. And at some point, we would like him to actually verbalize. I'd like to talk to you about a product we have.
Let me ask you, when these kids graduate from your program and they're in adulthood, are you helping them place in jobs?
Well, that's our sort of our next step. Our job right now is to get them from pre-K all the way through to age 22, to get them ready. Now, what's going to happen is in our entrepreneurship programs, our social enterprises, whether it's culinary or whether it's the retail business, they're actually going to be working and getting paid by us. Now, it's not going to be full-time work. It's not going to be, 40 hours a week. It's going to be whatever it is, but they're actually working and getting and making some money from us. That training then hopefully will move on to the next one. And so we're going to develop partnerships with other organizations like the Des Moines Foundation and the like. I mean, we haven't approached them yet, but we have ideas on saying, okay, this is what we've done with our kids so far. Now let's move on to the next level.
So you're in culinary and a few other sectors. So how do you decide what not to go into?
We decide what not to go into based on what our best assessment is of what the kids can do. And so culinary has been a traditional area that students on the spectrum and in general on the neurodivergent field have gone into. But then the retail piece, again, making things. It's every kid, no matter who, whether they're nonverbal or fully level 1 autistic, can make things. And then the selling piece is just going to be a function of what their capabilities are. Some kids will be able to actually do a great job, verbally selling. Other kids will need additional support, and like our nonverbal. Let me not use his real name. Mark, he yelled at me the other day. I mistakenly used his. This is for HIPAA purposes, by the way. We don't mention names of our kids, and then for those kids with some scaffolding and some support, we can get them out there so that maybe their parents will eventually say, what, let's start a little business ourselves, and then have Mark be our principal salesperson. Why not? And that's what we did with the Rising Startups. We developed a program where 6 families wound up making pitches for their startup ideas, all of which came from the students themselves, a passion for something they want to accomplish. We said, you got to work with your family, with your parents. The parents came in, and they had 6 ideas, came out, and they won $10,000 in what I call micro venture capital. And hopefully they will take that and build those businesses where those kids will be central to those businesses with parental support.
And speaking of parental support, what do you think makes for a good autism parent in that respect?
Oh boy, that's it. Just commitment, and find the time. Some of the most painful discussions I've had with parents are, I've got 3 kids, 2 of them are neurotypical, one of them is a level 2 or level 3 autistic kid who probably will stay home. Where do I allocate my time? I have so many hours in a day. That's a very, very tough discussion. And it's a very tough thing as a parent to handle. And so a good autistic parent is the kind of parent who finds that balance, realizing on the one hand, you can't sacrifice one for the other. You have to figure out how to do both. And so, and I'll give you an example. We started off with 14 families in our Rising Startups. We wound up with 6. The reason we lost 8 was exactly that reason. The parents just couldn't find the time to support their kids. And not a criticism of them. Some of these parents have 2 jobs, 3 jobs, single mothers or single fathers, mostly single mothers. And so we got to be careful about not being judgmental here. But the fact of the matter is those parents who can find the time and find the ability to balance how they raise a family, including an autistic child, is, I think, the key.
Talking about judgmentalism, I think that happens quite a bit. People who have neurotypical kids will look at parents of neurodivergent kids and the kids having a meltdown or whatever, and there's this judgment. And I don't think that people realize the time commitment, the emotional commitment, and the monetary commitment. If you have a kid who's level 3 with high support needs, that's tough. And I think that people who are not in this situation should be really well aware of that and not judge.
Yeah, well,
be more accepting.
Well, it's funny. I know you've had Commissioner Regalado on before. She has been a beautiful example. She'll post on her Instagram examples of where she's had to interject herself. If she's taken her daughter to a restaurant and her daughter had to start some stimming, and some people either comment or whatever, she gets up and goes and explains very politely, very calmly what is going on. She educates the community. Most parents won't do that. Most parents will feel embarrassed, will hide, whatever.
Or just don't want conflict.
Yeah, I just don't want to deal with the conflict and the like. And so she's a perfect example, I think, of someone who's does it right.
Yeah, and I would say this to parents on the other end of the spectrum, that I don't judge. When people do this stuff, I don't judge, because you know what? If I didn't have a autistic child, I might be doing the same thing. Right. I don't know. So I don't ever get angry or judge. It is what it is, and I'll educate if it's proper, but I don't want to be judged, and I don't judge either, because we're all just dealing with different stuff.
Yeah, I hate using the system. The system does not, and I say that, the educational system, the support system does not do a good job of taking, the 90% of the people who are neurotypical, or whatever the number is, and say, you know what, the world is bigger than just your universe, and so let's learn how to deal with that. And so one of the programs we're thinking about is some hybrid programs. Well, for instance, in music, we're talking about maybe doing a hybrid band with neurodivergent and neurotypical kids together. In the Rising Startups, we focus totally on neurodivergent startup teams. Maybe on the next round, we'll do a hybrid of neurodivergent and neurotypical team members coming together as part of our effort at getting that sort of awareness and acceptance.
Which I think is really important, having the neurotypicals and neurodivergent together, because you learn from each other. Yeah. And like my daughter, I try to have her around cousins and friends as much as possible who are not on the spectrum, so just so you can see different behaviors, and maybe that will catch on. Now, my daughter, she's level 2 nonverbal. back to the entrepreneurship and employment for the future. If that doesn't change, is she employable somehow, or we're looking at a child who's always going to be?
I I will never say never. I think that you will find, she will find a way to be a contributing member to our society. You just have to find the right support. And so I go back to Mark as an example. We're going to talk to his parents and say, you know what, he's a great salesman with some support. Let's find ways to make that happen. Now, most schools, most programs won't do that. And so you have to also find the right school and the right program to make sure, the right adult, the right therapist, whomever it is, to really help you walk down that path. So I look at all of our kids, and we have kids ranging from level 1 to level 3, and in all cases, certainly with the level 2s and the 3s in the world, we have found ways to get them very engaged, whether it's through the music, whether it's through the culinary, or whether it's through the retail side of things. And we're going to do the best that we can to give them jobs and employ them and get them ready for the next step. But now we have to start building the broader community to do the same.
Interesting. Now, Diego, I know you're 27. You're not a kid anymore, but you're younger than us. So how would you talk to the siblings of neurodivergent kids, like the brothers and sisters? Like, what would be your perspective to talk to them to be maybe more accepting or?
Well, growing up, basically, I knew that, the siblings of I'm neurotypical, they're usually very accepting of their brothers and sisters, really. I mean, I don't think I've met any family who discriminates against their autistic child or their neurodiverse child. So I'm not really experienced in the fact of, like, seeing families out there who discriminate against their children or against their brothers and sisters and stuff. So I'm not really sure how to answer that, because so far every family that I've met in my life neurodiverse, and I think all the brothers and sisters were the most accepting that I've seen. They're all very sweet to their brother. They take care of my family, no matter, like Ohana, like in legal stage, Ohana means family. Same thing with the kids, no matter what they have. I've never met any family who was like very like.
If I could interject, I think the closer the family is, meaning brothers and sisters, siblings, the experience I've seen there is, generally speaking, they are extremely accepting, very helpful. We saw it in the rising startups.
Right.
Once you move one step away, cousins, second cousins, then that becomes more of a challenge. And I have found one of our biggest challenges has been family, acceptance from the family. Not so much acceptance of Diego per se, but acceptance of challenging us, saying, "Oh, you haven't raised your kid right." I don't know if you've gotten that, but
Thank God I haven't. It's all been good, like Diego's.
But parents saying, if you did this, this, and this, it would turn out better. And so having those kind of conversations can be pretty tough. And so my view of the world is as you get further away from the family, the brothers and sisters and mom and dad, that's where the challenges come in.
Yeah, I've not experienced. I've only good experiences with my family, thank
good.
God. But I have, heard and seen negative ones, and families like on Christmas, forever, they can't get together because there's just all such judgmentalism. So I would say to those families, if it gets to the point where you can't even be together, then maybe you just gotta just
let it go.
let it go and just ease off and just accept that it is what it is. And parents, we all want what's best for our kids.
Yeah.
The execution might be wrong,
right.
But if the intent is good,
we're human beings. We make mistakes, and so rather than be judgmental, then fine. What are some of the recommendations? What do you think? Give us some thoughts. And so that's the way we try to handle it.
And what have been your experiences in terms like outside of the autism world, which is neurotypical friends or neighbors? What's been your experience, Diego?
Well, of course, I've always been through the real world experience of what it's like just to be neurodiverse in a neurotypical world. There's a lot of ignorance, really, against neurodiverse individuals. They don't understand that just because we STEM, it doesn't mean that we're like crazy. We're just like people who are just trying to like get their emotions out, because we have different ways of expressing our emotions than most neurotypical people do. I mean, some people might have a different way of expressing emotion, whereas we have a specific like routine that we follow or things. Like one of the things that actually my dad was questioning me about was actually I like to repeat videos a lot and stuff like on over and over again, like my favorite music videos or like race car videos. And he asked me, why do I do that? And I said, well, that's just one of the ways that I relax, one of the ways that I get my anxiety out, by looking at something that I've looked at and felt comfortable with from the start. It kind of gives me a sense of comfort. And the same thing happens. So like, a lot of people in the world don't understand that neurodiverse people have, their stimmings, and a lot of the things that they do is for a reason, like to comfort them, to make sure that they're regulated in a good setting and stuff. So whenever there's a new setting, I've been discriminated against just because of the way I act. So the people call it acting quirky. Well, I think it's just people have to learn to accept that it's not just not a harmful behavior. It's just that's the way that I relax, and that other people have their ways of relaxing. Basically.
And that's a really tough question because obviously I've been dealing with it for 27 years, trying to see how he sort of fits into the real world, as we call it. And we have been lucky in the sense that he is an incredible musician. And when you're really good at something, people forget about, everything else. Okay. Then after a while, if they get to know you better, then they see the quirks and who knows. But when you're really good at something, and so I know that not every kid out there is going to be, a Berkeley educated musician or top whatever. But when you do have some skill or some capability that makes you special, very often that can push away some of the judging that happens. But it is a tough issue of being able to integrate with the neurotypical community.
Diego, was bullying ever part of your experience in school?
Absolutely, without a doubt.
And how did you deal with it?
Well, of course, there was always the emotional aspect. I cried. Everybody would cry if somebody was bullying them very badly. But I always had very supportive parents out there who always said to me that, no matter what happens in this world, there's always going to be good people and a good light shining at the end of the tunnel that always is there to help you out. But I've been bullied very badly just because I was neurodiverse. I was made to do humiliating things that were not my choice, that I didn't realize back then.
By your peers or by the teachers?
By the peers, mostly. Teachers, I never really had a problem, except maybe for a few, but I won't mention their names because I don't want to, get sued type thing. But, but I had many experiences out there that basically that have been like tough on me for things. But I think the best way that I looked at it was that I just kept looking at my guitar and practicing it and trying to be the best I can be. That music was always an oasis for me to relax and have under my wing when I got bullied and everything.
And his ability to deal with the bullying as a parent, I am so grateful because he's a big guy.
He is a big kid.
And if he got angry, I feel sorry for the other side of things. And he doesn't engage that part of his brain.
That's good.
And so his mother and I do not worry at all that one day we're going to get a call saying, your kid just beat the crap out of somebody. He is very calm. He handles the bullying even to today. Because this bullying occurs today, even at his age group. But he knows how to just chill and deal with it.
You find yourself being bullied at your age now still?
Well, I wouldn't exactly call it bully, but basically being excluded from activities that regular people do. Like I have had some musicians out there who did not appreciate me being at the gig because they thought I was maybe a little bit too rockish or too hard rock, or that I was a little bit too excited, that they don't understand my happiness and like enthusiasm, no matter how like things should be. So I've been like excluded, been gossiped about and everything, but I never resort to violence because I know violence doesn't really get you anywhere in terms of solving a problem. Basically, the only way for me to solve a problem is just to find the audience. And if I was ever put in a situation where somebody got angry at me or try to challenge me to some sort of dispute, the best thing that I learned to do is just walk away and try to find somebody else who is a better alternative to hang out with.
Yeah, and find your tribe, because there's going to be people that
Right.
that just care about the music and not neurodivergence or diversity. Just
Right.
it's all about the music. And if somebody's like excluding because of your personality, it's like then it's not even about the music anymore. It's just about personalities. It's like
Right.
that's not going to go anywhere. I don't
Right.
think.
Right.
You know, Diego, when I was in school, autism was not part of the conversation. I mean, there are kids I can look back now and say that kid was autistic because, like in kindergarten, there was one boy who would do this the whole day. Well, he was stimming, but it wasn't part of the conversation even up to high school.
Right.
Was autism part of the conversation when you were in school?
Actually, not really. When I was in middle school, elementary school, autism was not really ever talked about. I never actually heard of the term autism until I was like in high school, really. So like all through middle school.
Did you know you were autistic when it was mentioned, or
No, I basically the diagnosis that I've got when I was young was ADHD, ADD, but I never really focused on the autism piece because I actually never heard of that term before. Nobody even talked about it. But back in my day, since people didn't understand what they used to refer to as very offensive terms, which I won't mention because it's very offensive. Term the R word, all that, it was just very offensive terms that
is pretty offensive.
Nobody should
Yes.
have to hear
No, they
nowadays. But
shouldn't.
basically, that's what the kids used to refer to it back then, and some very ignorant teachers used to refer to it as back then as well. So unfortunately, back then it was like expressed as that, and nowadays since since the community got more educated in terms of how people act, nowadays people are much more aware than they were back then, because people back then, in my opinion, were not as aware as they are now.
And even we as parents, his mother and I, Carmen and I don't know if it was in denial, but basically, we just said, some learning differences. But we saw some quirky stuff, and what is this? And it wasn't until a psychiatrist that was working with him in high school, right? Yeah, high school, said, Diego is on the spectrum. I don't need to.
what year was this?
This would have been what?
2013.
Second year of high school, second, third year of high school.
Oh, second and
Doctor-
third year. Well, no, Dr. Antunez.
No, doctor.
Good.
The doctor up in Connecticut.
Oh, the psychiatrist.
Yeah. Anyway,
Forgot his name. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember him. I forgot his name, but yes, what you were saying.
yeah. So this would have been in high school. So that would have been, you were 15, you're
15,
27,
14
12 years
years
ago.
old.
12 years ago.
14,
So
15,
yeah, 2013. Yeah. And so you realize he's on the spectrum. I don't need to do any big tests, but this is he's on the spectrum.
Did that have meaning to you? Being on the
Well,
spectrum?
you know what? Yes, and I mean, intellectually, yes. I mean, I knew what autism was, but we were so against labels. We were so anti-label.
Why?
Because when you put a label on something, then you've got those preconceived notions coming in, whether it's from therapists. We would even withhold things from some of the teachers, whatever, and let them judge for themselves rather than telling them, this is what we think. Because he never got an official autism diagnosis. It's not on his record.
When he was in high school.
So yeah.
Okay.
And so, again, maybe we were in denial, but part of it was we just don't want to deal with labels. And he is who he is, and we'll support him the best that we can, and deal with life as it comes. And that's why we continue to do it. But we realize also now that there have to be voices out there. We do have to talk about it. We do have to, so I always ask them, when we go out to something, do you have a problem if we talk about your neurodivergence, your autism, whatever? Absolutely not. And so, we're very open about it now, and we are huge advocates for the community.
As far as labels, I'll play devil's advocate, because Diego, you're very high functioning and low support needs. But then you've got someone like my daughter.
Right.
She's lower functioning, higher support needs. So she needs that label, because without that label, she won't get the support services.
Agreed.
So, the parents that are listening to this, you have to weigh where your kid's at on the spectrum.
Agreed. Yeah, I was speaking from personal experience, and because of where Diego's at, I totally agree with you that for the kids who are level 2, level 3, higher needs, people have to understand this. There's a reason for this, and it's a medical condition, it's a neurological condition, and we've got to deal with it.
Yeah, and having spoken to experts like Dr. Michael Alessandri,
Right.
he'll tell you the younger you get them,
Oh yeah.
OT, speech therapy, ABA, the better the outcomes.
Right.
So these parents that are like on the fence, I don't want to have a label for my kid because then they're labeled. But, if they're level 2 or 3 with high support needs, then they're not going to get the help they need.
Right.
Because if you don't get the evaluation, the diagnosis, the IEP, they're going to be put into a neurotypical class and basically just ignored.
Right.
Because these teachers, it's not that they're bad people, they just don't have the capacity
Right. Now when
or
you're
the
dealing
training.
now when you're dealing with whatever 20, 30 kids that you have in the classroom, over the last few years that I've been involved, a lot of the kids who've come in to us that's where they've come from. They've come from public school or even a private school where they weren't getting the kind of services that they had hoped for or were expecting. And then they would come to us and say, and they would do a tour, and they would go, oh, so that's what individualized learning is, and they saw a big difference in terms of the approach, and then the challenge is when you get a kid at 14, 15, 16, you wish you were able to do stuff 10 years ago. But the reality is it is what it is, and you work with it. And so Mark is a great example of that. He came into us with self-harming behaviors, aggressive behaviors.
At what age?
At 15.
And he didn't have the diagnosis yet at 15?
He had his diagnosis.
Yeah, okay.
He had his diagnosis, but my understanding is, and again, I wasn't involved in the direct evaluation, but my understanding was they really weren't, the school that he was at really wasn't supporting him. And so we had a very clear plan on what we wanted to do. And you can imagine why the self-injurious behavior, why the aggression, because of the frustration, right? Being nonverbal. And so today, Mark, 98% of all those behaviors are gone.
That's amazing.
Not in part, due to, the way he's developed. This young man now, he's a chef, he's a baker, he's a salesperson. He has, and the other part of this is I do what I do as much for the parents as I do for the kids. Okay.
Yes, the parents are a huge part of the equation.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the challenges of having 3 or 4 kids and raising them, and 1 or 2 being autistic, and then the worst part of all is limited resources. Thank God, my wife and I, Carmen and I, were able to develop the resources to be able to support our kid in the best way we could. 90% of the families out there don't have those resources. And so on top of the psychological challenges of raising a family, not having the resources to give the kids the support they need is a horrible situation to be in. So that's one of the reasons why I focus a lot on that, on how to help these parents get access to resources, have them get the support that they need, because I just don't understand how someone can deal with what they have to deal with, particularly when they're low on financial resources.
Alone you can't. It takes a tribe.
Yeah.
There it is in Miami-Dade County. I think there's a great system if you plug into it. And I think a lot of parents aren't plugged into it. They don't know where to start. So, I mean, a great place to start is CARD, Center for Autism-Related Disabilities. There's also early steps when they're little. There's fiddlers when they're a little bit older. And then, of course, there's the public schools once they're age 5 and up. So the system's out there. The parents just got to plug into it. Yeah. So, Diego, I'm a little bit fuzzy on the timeline. How old were you when you got your diagnosis? Do you remember it? And how'd you feel about that?
Well, I remember, I'm not really sure of how old I was. My dad might have known about that, but I do remember around when I was in middle school, I was 13, 12 years old. I used to go to these places to evaluate my writing skills, the way my brain works and everything. So I remember when I was around 11, 12, 13 years old, around that age range, I used to actually go to these places and, evaluate my skills, my talking, my verbal senses, my verbal talking. And it was basically around that age that I think I was diagnosed with ADHD.
And learning differences,
right?
Learning disabilities.
But that's the most accurate represent I can.
And
remember.
Then, as I mentioned, as he got older, when we sat down with the psychiatrist at roughly 2013, he would have been 15? 14?
I would have been 14, something like that.
Is when we, the first time we had heard the words autistic, and then things started making sense in terms of some of the stimming, some of the repetitive behaviors, and because as I'm sure you know, as an autism dad, our kids have multiple diagnoses, right? Multiple comorbidities, and so it's like, okay, what's going to hit me next, And so when the psychiatrist told us that, I said, okay, that makes sense. Now we get why these things happen. But at the end of the day, again, because Diego's very high functioning, very high performing, for us the path was a little bit easier. Not so much for him, but for us the path was a little bit easier.
Now, Diego, you work with much younger kids. Not your kid, but you work with young kids. So when you have a young person who's just getting their diagnosis for the first time and they're working through this, how do you help them to work through that if they've got issues with it?
Well, basically, I follow what my boss tells me to do, basically. Like, they already have the tailored curriculum that was made for them. So my job as a teacher, mostly, because keep in mind, I'm not a therapist, I'm not an RBT, I'm not any of that. I'm just a teacher, a certified teacher. That's what I am. But basically, my job is to teach the material in a very patient, calm, mannerful way. Basically, a way to teach them that goes with their own pace and what they need. Basically, when I teach people, when I teach certain students, I go at their own pace. They might get frustrated at times because they're not as fast as the other students, and I always remind them that, listen, there is no rush in life. We have to maintain a certain pace for you to get as successful as you can be. So basically based on what their certain needs are and what they need to accomplish, I basically teach them the material at a very calm pace. There's never any like bad negative judgment, no bad ridicule whenever they mess up on a piece of work, just words of encouragement. Sometimes you have to sprinkle in a little bit of tough love in there to get them more motivated, but most of the time it's just a working pace that will work for each individual student's needs.
Isn't it also true that when you see behaviors in those kids that you also have?
Yeah, I also relate to that too. Cause I've seen some kids exhibit some behaviors that I used to exhibit at their age. So whenever I see that, it brings me back to my childhood. It brings me back to when I was a student, that I used to act like that once in a while. But it's just basically the beauty of the neurodivergent mind, of what we can express when we're frustrated, when we're in like a bad mood, or sometimes when we're in a good mood. Basically, teaching is an adventure. There's always steps to learn, steps to ABC to learn.
So he brings real life experience,
Lived experience.
Because
you're not an RBT, but you've been through things that they haven't been through.
Exactly, exactly right. He's not an RBT. He's not a neurotypical teacher. Yeah,
He's just an autistic kid, so he has very good life experience.
He's bringing those life experiences to there,
right.
And I hate to I love my kid. The kids love him. They relate to him really, really well. I mean, sometimes too much. Sometimes they have to his colleagues have to remind him, Diego, you are a teacher, not one of the kids. But the reality is one of the reasons the kids really, I think, learn a lot from him is exactly that. They relate to him much, much better.
Yeah.
No, so that's the autistic individuals. How about the parents? Like, how are we dealing with them in these scenarios?
One of the biggest joys I get, and he does too. Well, the biggest joy is when he tells me, so-and-so's parents came up to me yesterday and said, thank you so much for what you do with my kid. Blah, blah. And I'm like, oh my God. Parents come up to, because I'm a very active board member, I'm an active volunteer. Parents come up to me and the same thing. It's like, you can't believe what you do for our kids is just unbelievable. So I get that part. The teachers, Diego and the other teachers sometimes get the rougher parts, right? Which is, how come he's not performing the way we were hoping, or how come this is happening, and so it becomes a situation. Well, you can speak to that. Does a parent come to you and say, how can so and so do something better?
Well, the thing is that I haven't had many parents come up to me. I haven't had many parents come up to me and say, how is my kid not doing better as well as these kids? I think from my experience, all parents have been very appreciative, because I tell the parents up front before they think that everybody, no matter how neurodivergent you are or how smart they may be, everybody goes at their own pace, and it's completely okay to learn step by step, because not everybody's the same. Not every neurodivergent individuals the same way. They're not all going to learn at the same speed. Some might learn faster than others. Some might be in the middle, and some might be in the low, and where they can't learn as and process things as fast. So I tell parents like a lot that it's at their own pace, and no matter what, we'll always be there for the kid. No matter how like fast he learns, we'll always try to teach him as much information as we can to make sure he ensures that we give him the education that he needs or he or she needs.
You know, you mentioned some behaviors that you engaged in when you were younger that maybe were some negative behaviors. If you could talk to that 14-year-old Diego that was doing things that maybe shouldn't have been doing, what would you tell that kid to help him work through it?
Well, if I had to tell my younger self what to do, I would probably say take things more seriously, because I used to like not really I used to fool around much more and be me in the mature mind. I know that it was part of my diagnosis that I was like that, but I would honestly say to myself like no matter what happened to you, if I happened to that, I wish I would have taken it more seriously, because I seen some things that I haven't taken as seriously as I should have. But if I had taken myself more seriously back then and trusted myself more, I would have been more confident, right? Because I'm still working on developing that confidence today. And so it really depends on how you put it, because that's a kind of a tricky question to ask me, because I have done some things that were not as good in the past that I could have done better today.
Yeah, but that lack of seriousness, that's not a spectrum thing. That's across the board.
Right.
I can say the same thing about myself. I wouldn't say that's strictly autistic kids that are not serious. I wasn't serious either when I was 14. I was goofing off like crazy. So
Right, yeah, but I mean, there's a more broad aspect of it. My dad probably can go into further detail, but basically the best thing that I could tell myself back then is be yourself, don't take it too far, and do the best you can. Just try 100%. I had an old principal of mine, headmaster, used to say, you try your best, you do what you need to do, and you get the job done.
Good. Now, Bob, the Rising Star, it's a private foundation. Mm-hmm. So when parents come to you, they're coming to you. Mm-hmm. Do you find any that are still in denial somehow, or are they fully accepted?
Yeah. Well, the denial in the sense of, and we did the same thing. I was a father who said, my kid's going to be neurotypical, and he's going to have a typical neurotypical path, and that's it. He's going to graduate from college. He's going to be an engineer, whatever. I was one of those fathers. Carmen was a bit more realistic. We get a bit of the same with our parents, which they come to us with expectations that their kids can do so much, and we support them. We say, if you want your kid to go for instance, if you want your kid to go for a standard Florida diploma, we'll support that. But we're going to have to make some big adjustments in the curriculum and the like, and then you're going to have to figure out, at some point in time, if we have to make some big adjustments, then we're going to have to make some decisions then. So we'll support you, and if you want to pursue a traditional academic path, but at some point in time, if we need to go towards a more functional path.
What does that mean by functional and academic?
Okay, so all of us, right? We want our kids to have a high school diploma, go to college. For a lot of us, okay, that's just not a reality for a lot of our kids, and so we have what's called two tables. We have one which is the high performing level 1, low no needs desk, and then we have the level 2, 3 desk, which is the functional. We do functional language arts. We're not teaching high-end poetry. Okay, we're not teaching fourth year poetry. We're teaching simpler poetry. We're teaching kids how to read the newspaper. We're teaching kids how to read news articles as opposed to literature. On the math side of things, instead of, if you want to get a standard diploma, you have to algebra, trigonometry, those famous subjects we used to love. Our functional kids are doing more basic math, how to count change, how to do a budget, that type of math. Our kids in the level 2 and 3 are not going to get a standard diploma, and 90% of the parents understand that and get that. They realize that what we're trying to do is get their kids to full potential.
That's a great full potential, whatever that might be.
Yeah, whatever that might be, and by definition, it's left gray, because we don't know. You asked me about your daughter, right? We don't know what she'll be able to do 10 years from now. But what we do know is we can work with her today over those 10 years
To get to her
to
full
get
potential,
her to whatever
whatever
her
it
full
might be.
potential it might be. And as long as that's how we're focused, then we're doing the right thing.
And I also think that there's no shame. And what I mean by that is, like, one kid becomes a physicist, the other one becomes a plumber. But you know what? We need plumbers. And there's no shame in that,
Absolutely.
right? I mean, we need plumbers. We need people in the trades.
And neurotypical kids are realizing that too.
Yes.
Getting $200,000 loans for college where they wind up not using their liberal arts degree. The trades are becoming a very popular place to be. So, whether it's neurotypical, neurodivergent, or whatever, again, the spectrum is probably an overused word, but there's a wide spectrum here.
There is. And no matter what technologies that we develop, AI, what have you, we're always going to have the trades, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, and they're actually very well paid trades also. It's not, and you don't have to go $200,000 into student loans either. So, and there's no shame in that.
Yeah,
That's just perfectly
absolutely.
fine.
And actually, you mentioned AI. So I think AI is another huge area of focus for our kids because, if we can get our kids to learn how to give the right prompts into, a ChatGPT or a Perplexity or whatever, it can really take those kids to a very different level and take their teachers to a very different level too. And so I think there's huge opportunities there as well.
I do too. And thinking back to what you were saying about you used to watch these videos on repeat all the time, that actually, for a musician, is a superpower because you got to get your 10,000 hours in. But watching these videos and watching high performers, who's the best guitar player out there?
That's actually a question that is actually really much not
in debate,
well
right?
discussed in the community because there's so many styles out there when it comes to the music
Who's
community.
your favorite?
Well, my favorite right now, when I was in high school, it was two guys. It was middle school. Actually, it was one guy, Angus Young from AC/DC, was one of my favorites, one of my biggest inspirations. And my two main inspirations were one of the most famous blues guitarists from Texas. His name was Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the rock and roll guitarist, the one I call him a monster, is Eddie Van Halen.
Of course. So, watching those pros over and over and over again, that's a superpower.
Yeah.
That's not like a deficit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've always talk about superpowers. I was always amazed. He'll get up on stage and so he got called up by somebody who had lost their band members, was asked if they could.
Well, I wouldn't say lose, but they couldn't make it to the gig.
They got sick, and then they said, "Here's the set list. Do you think you can come tomorrow night and play with the band?" And he stayed up for a few hours, got the set list, went there, and then half the time he's just looking at the other the bass player who's the lead there. What she was doing with her fingers, and then he just picks it up, and the set was unbelievable. Again, proud father talking, but again, superpowers, and he's got those superpowers.
That's fantastic. Now, you guys have been on the journey now for quite some time now. Looking into the future, what does success look like for you, for the Rising Stars, and just for the autism community in general?
Success, from my perspective, for the Rising Start is touching a much larger population. Right now we're a small program. We've got 16 kids in our middle and high school program. We've got 10 kids in our elementary school program, and there's one way to say, okay, that's good enough, right? But we're doing such good work there to be able to just touch a much larger audience. I think can make a big difference. And so one of the things we're doing, for instance, in the entrepreneurship program is using technology to expand our capability. So we're going to do an online program next year in entrepreneurship, make it available even to the neurotypical community if they want it. And so expanding beyond our small universe, I think, is, to me, what success is all about. Having, instead of 16, 20 kids, 30, 40, 50 kids who have been touched by us and have reached their full potential, whatever that may be.
Are you familiar with Khan Academy?
Khan Academy?
Yeah.
I used to do it back in my day. We used to do it online.
You mean the online? Yeah.
Because that's really interesting what you're saying now, because then you can go international. Do you see like what you're talking about going like a Khan economy, but for neurodivergent kids?
Again, I'm not an expert. I'm not a clinical expert. One of the things I did learn is teaching online is a big challenge. It's a big challenge for neurotypical kids. It's even a bigger challenge for neurodivergent kids. But if done right, if done with the right visuals, with the right pacing, the right context, there is a space for that.
I think so too.
There is a space for that.
Diego, what courses did you take at Khan Economy?
Well, I mean, it was not really like a courses that I took. My teachers back in middle school.
What was your interest?
It was basically to help me in math, like skills, math, English, anything that I needed to be a little bit. We used mainly Khan Academy back in middle school to just refine my vocabulary skills and my math skills a little bit better.
Why don't you talk about, because when you went to Berkeley, so Diego's a graduate of the Berkeley College of Music, which is one of the
In Boston, not the Berkeley, California, as people
the
get
Boston.
confused.
It's one of the preeminent schools in the world in music. He actually went 2 summers live on campus. And on the performance side, he was incredible. On the academic side, it was a challenge. And then when the pandemic hit, he came to Miami. He chose to finish up online. And all of a sudden, big difference. And so what do you attribute that difference to? What did online do for you that helped you versus being live on campus in class?
Well, the first thing that I feel that for a neurodivergent student, being on campus, while it is an awesome thing, it was awesome being in the city of Boston, that big, all these good restaurants out there, these good things. The outside community, on top of the good restaurants and entertainment, it's a huge distraction, in my opinion, for a neurodivergent.
For all kids, though.
For all kids, though, but especially for a neurodivergent kid like me, it was a huge distraction. So with like these restaurants that had like the best food, because I'm a big food critic. I love food, there's no doubt, but I used to always go out and have fun instead of really focus on my academics, because there was all these distracting restaurants and these activities to do all over Boston. Whereas in the online program, I was in my own house, and in the pandemic where all these activities were closed off due to the sickness and everything, but online I had more time to focus on my own thing and to focus on my own studio in a space where there's not too many distractions.
And you didn't feel like you were being judged by the other students?
It was not really the aspect of being judged by the other students that really like set me off towards the thing. It was mostly the online worked a lot better for me because of the distraction portion, because it was less distractions and more focus on the actual academic work than it is. I think the biggest thing, in my opinion, for a neurodivergent kid, to the challenges with being thrown into the actual campus with all these kids, friends, activities, is a distraction of having all those things, that rather than having the exact sole purpose of studying for the academic work as well.
And these online courses, if you found them very helpful, would you make any changes for the neurodivergent world, or would you leave them as is, the way that you found them?
Well, actually, no. I would make a few changes because there's no doubt Berkeley College of Music is very successful. They've been successful for over 50 years with the online program, with the with the school and everything. But a lot of the stuff that happens in Berkeley is very neurotypical oriented. So there's a lot of musicians out there that you go there and are neurotypical and everything. So the online program doesn't have, like, I would say, the best needs or the best resources for neurodivergent kids. Some of the teachers I noticed were not really as accepting with neurodivergent people and stuff. And that's one of the things that I had to accept about the school, that no matter how unaccepting they were of neurodivergent kids, I used to say to myself, okay, I have to find a way to, learn their way. So I would have to work extra harder. So my time at Berkeley was stressful at times because I had to work much harder than a lot of other students had to, because of things that I couldn't process as much or as clearly as other people could.
But to give Berkeley some positive
credit,
part of the online program is you had private instruction once a week, so you actually had the teacher there with you.
Yeah, he had an hour a week,
and so that was 8 semesters of that.
Right.
And these guys, and they were all guys, but these guys were unbelievable with him. because
At least two of them were.
his quirkiness sometimes can get in the way of things, right?
Right.
His enthusiasm, he's really enthusiastic
About music, especially. Yeah.
about music, especially, and then the questions. You could imagine him just asking lots and lots and lots of questions because he loves to talk, and yet these teachers really took the time to just work with him,
Right.
and they taught him amazing stuff, and so the more personal it was. So, for instance, we talk about online teachers. They touch you for half an hour a week at most, not even that much. Whereas the private instruction was physically an hour every week, and so I think they got it. They got him immediately.
Yeah, they knew that I was on the spectrum.
and figured out how to work with him and how to make him a much better musician.
Now, these things that they were unaccepting of, give me one example, and how would you address that?
Well, I needed some accommodations, really. Like, if a homework assignment was basically a little bit too hard, like, they had me record a video of me playing all these very complex guitar chords, and I had to play them all in a 150-minute video. So 1 minute and 50 videos all at once and everything. Some teachers, I used to tell them that, my brain cannot really process as many chords like that in 1 minute, like to memorize that, either memorize or just practice it, but I can't read as much. So I used to cut my intervals, and there's the 30-second videos. I do one section of the video with certain chords, and then I will send the other video one. But some of the teachers were not really happy with that, saying it should be done this way or the highway. But, so I had to, pull myself together and said, okay, I got to do what this, because if he's been doing longer this than I have, it obviously works for him and other people. So basically what I did was I would work extra harder to actually try to do it correctly. Eventually the videos will start improving. I started improving from 30 seconds to 45 seconds, and then from 45 seconds I would improve to 1 minute. And so it eventually came down to where I was able to play a minute of 1 minute and 30 seconds, and the teacher would say, okay, you know what, I'll let that go, because that's good enough.
And every teacher is different. Right. So you asked earlier about interjecting yourself. So ear training is a very, very important part of music training. Okay, you have to pass ear training to get your degree.
Bachelor's, yeah.
And he's taking his last ear training class, and he was struggling with it, and to the point where I was worried that he was not going to be able to graduate. So I called up his teacher, and I said, so and so, this is what's going on. And to her credit, she says, yeah, I got a sense that something was going on here. I have a friend I can't do it, but I have a friend who can give him some private instruction.
Who happened to be one of my old professors at college too.
Right. And if he does this, I'm pretty sure he'll get through it. And that's exactly what we did. And he got through it. So again, it's going to be very specific, teacher by teacher by teacher.
Of course.
Right.
Now, I just got the 2-minute warning. Anything that you'd like to throw in here at the end, Bob?
Well, first of all, this is a great opportunity. Thank you for doing this. It's a great opportunity to get the word out. For those parents out there who are dealing with some of the things we've talked about, know that there are organizations, there are people like yourself, like the Rising Start, like Commissioner Regalado. There are people out there willing to back you up and willing to help you and work with you. But you have to get out there and ask for it. Look for it and ask for it, because there are people who will be there for you. That, to me, is probably the most important message I would give to the parents out there.
If somebody wanted your help, Bob, how would they get a hold of you?
Rising Start, you can reach me at bob.davila at the Rising Start, at risingstart.org. I can leave you my phone number. I can also, maybe we can post later on the video the contact information. More than happy to sit down with anybody, either on the clinical side. Maybe Alejandro would be happy to sit down on the clinical side. I'd be happy to talk about generally, as a parent, how to deal with some of these issues. So
great. And Diego, I know you play professionally. What kind of gigs do you do?
Well, I basically play blues gigs. That's one of my main professions right now. Blues, a little bit. I do mostly rock and roll gigs right now, but my real interest is blues gigs. I'm a big blues man. If it wasn't for blues, I don't think I would have played the guitar as I am today.
And how can people find you?
People find me on Instagram all the time. I have my Instagram handle, which is DD King, Dr. Feelgood. Actually, one of my Instagram handles is actually a Motley Crue song, Dr. Feelgood. So DD King, Dr. Feelgood. You can find me on Spotify and Amazon Music. I have covers and originals, some originals that are posted under my stage name, which is actually DD King, like double D King.
Great.
So,
Now,
yeah.
you're going to play a set for us. What are you going to play for us?
I'll play you some blues, some like Chicago fast-paced blues that I like to play, a little bit of that, you know.
Great. Okay. So this has been the Autism Podcast with Bob and Diego Davila. Thank you for joining us. And until next time, thank you.